I'm going to talk a little bit more about yarn because I am really into yarn now. Not only crochet, yarn as its own individual topic I am into, and fabric and different fibers. And before I started crocheting, I never really thought about like what clothes are made out of as much. And now I'm really into fabrics, and I like to go to the thrift store and like touch stuff and see if I can feel what it's made out of. You get the feel of what different fibers are like, and you get an appreciation for like linen and silk and I don't know, cashmere, like stuff like that. But I digress. So when I first started, I didn't know, $2 acrylic from $40 mohair. I was like, why is this yarn so expensive when I can buy this cheap yarn? But then I realized that the really cheap yarn felt like garbage. It's hard sometimes to like get a feel for what it's actually going to feel like until you make something with it, if that makes sense. Like sometimes you get a ball or a thing of yarn and it feels just fine, but then after you work with it, you're like, this, some yarns actually like hurt your fingers. Like some acrylic yarns, if you're crocheting with it wrapped around your finger, it has this like abrasive quality. And some acrylic yarns, I mean, I don't want to totally hate on acrylic because I know a lot of people use it and it is a worthy fiber in its own right, especially if you are like sensitive to wool and stuff like that. And I have also the whole thing about synthetic fibers versus natural is a whole other topic that I might make a video about, or I think I'm just going to make a video about yarn. So not all yarn is created equal. There is expensive yarn for a reason, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it is worth spending a lot of money on. I've kind of, I guess, gone down the middle. I've gained an appreciation for nice yarns, and I mainly only use natural fibers now, which are fibers that come from either an animal like wool, or plants like cotton, hemp, linen, stuff like that. Those are natural fibers. And then synthetic fibers are acrylic, nylon, polyester, and spandex. Those are all synthetic fibers. And they're either like heavily chemically treated or just made out of plastic, which is acrylic is actually plastic, which is kind of interesting. You can get a feeling for what you like, and synthetic yarns tend to be a lot more inexpensive, which is nice when you're just learning and just want to not spend a whole lot of money on yarn, but kind of just start to experiment and have fun. When I first started, I kind of went to extremes. I either bought like the cheapest yarn at the thrift store that was like really low quality acrylic, and I made this project that I spent a lot of time on and was actually really nice, but I ended up being totally dissatisfied with it later because the yarn quality was just not that good, and I think I just ended up giving it away. After that I was like, okay, I'm gonna spend $25 on this wool, which was also kind of unnecessary. Nowadays I don't usually buy full price yarn unless I need it for something really specific, like I have a commission or I need it to finish a project. I usually don't go to the store and buy like yarn that isn't on sale. My yarn collection right now is mostly stuff I found on sale at the yarn store, stuff I've bought on eBay, yarn that I have unraveled from sweaters at the thrift store, which is something cool you can do, or yarn that people have just given me because people are nice, and I've like made connections with other fiber artists, and I've been given quite a few pretty impressive yarn hauls, and it helps if you like live near a small independent yarn shop and you make friends with people who work there. The ladies at my local yarn store are super sweet, and sometimes they've given me yarn that they don't want to sell for whatever reason. Getting yarn from unraveling a sweater is really great because it's a lot cheaper than buying new yarn, of course, and you can go look through and look at the fabric tag. It'll say what it's made out of on the label inside, and you can use that to choose what kind of yarn you want. There are videos online all about the art of unraveling thrifted sweaters, and when I first started, I kind of messed up my sweater that I was trying to unravel by cutting into it and breaking the yarn into a million little pieces, so you should just go watch one of those videos if you want to try that. It is a bit of a project. It's definitely more effort than just buying yarn, but that's a good place to start. Thrift stores also just have the craft section, and sometimes you can find pretty cool yarn there. A lot of the time it's like not the best quality, but sometimes it's good, so it's worth checking out. I guess I'll also just tell you what types of yarn I would recommend for what projects you might have in mind. So I would say like there's kind of two categories of things you could make that would dictate your yarn choice, and the first one is like warm wear, like winter wear. For most winter wear, like hats and scarves and mittens and sweaters, I would recommend using either like something with wool or a wool blend or acrylic, because those tend to be warmer and fuzzier and soft and stretchier also. So like if you're making a beanie or a toque, if you're Canadian, it'll be more stretchy and fitting, versus if you use cotton to make something like that, it will be a little bit more stiff and not like grip onto your head. You can use cotton to make sweaters. Actually, I think this sweater is mostly wool. I think that the brown and white are like some kind of acrylic wool blend. I think I made this when I was trying to phase out using synthetic yarns on my pieces that I want to sell, so I'm like, I'll just use the rest of them to make myself a sweater. So yarns that are like fuzzy and warm and have a little bit more like elasticity to them, like those ones, I would recommend for those kind of things. Then the plant-based fibers, and also some acrylics as well. I'm not really like knowing what makes a difference between different types of synthetic yarns as much, because they're not really my thing anymore, but there are some acrylic yarns that you could make like that would fit into the summer category. I guess my categories are winter and summer. So I would use cotton if you want to make like purse, because it doesn't stretch as much as wool or acrylic does, and it's a little bit stronger. It's not meant to be like warm and fuzzy. So yeah, I would use cotton for things like purses, and if you want to make summer tops and like summer outfits that you don't want them to be hot and warm, I would use cotton. And I say cotton as because it's probably the easiest to get and most inexpensive like plant-based fiber for beginners, but you know, there's other plant-based fibers that I really like as well, like linen, bamboo, hemp, silk. And silk isn't plant-based, it's made from moths, but or worms. But silk is nice as well, and very light and airy stuff. Yeah, so if you're thinking about like making a summer thing, just I would recommend using perhaps acrylic depending on the type, or cotton, or there's some other plant-based yarn. And if you want to make something that's warm and snuggly and a little bit stretchy, then maybe go towards the wool and other wool type yarns, and acrylics as well. I think I need to make a whole video about yarns and like different brands and what I specifically like for different types of projects and what my favorite yarns are. I'm gonna talk about what some good beginner projects might be, and also what tools you should get when you're just starting. I already said that you should just practice the basics, but I think after that, some projects that are easier are probably ones that aren't like meant to be very specific size, if that makes sense. Because if you're making something that's like a scarf or a purse, or maybe even a big baggy sweater, it doesn't really matter as much if it's like a specific size, so you don't have to worry about that as much. And I think also that doing something that doesn't have a lot of different color changes and is more in a solid piece is easier as well. I mean, you can even get yarn that is all different colors. If you're curious, I got this on sale at the yarn store. It's this, I think it's a cotton and acrylic blend. You can get yarn that changes color by itself, and then you don't have to worry about connecting ends and sewing in ends and changing yarns and stuff. I think a good beginner project would be like a simple beanie. You can look up some YouTube videos on that or some patterns, and maybe something like a scarf, or like I said, a baggy sweater, which you can make just by making like 2 big squares and then 2 other rectangles for the arms and sewing it all together. So that's pretty simple. After you master those, you can learn some different stitch types and have fun with like different stitch textures, and maybe make things that are more fitted and complicated. And also, I think once you learn how to make like a panel, you could look up a video on how to make a granny square, because those are a lot of fun. That's what I would call my purse. Like the squares that I use to make this are granny squares. So if you master how to make those, you can put them together into all sorts of things, and they're really cute and quite iconic of the crochet aesthetic, I guess, if that's even a thing. I want to tell you what tools I think you should get if you're just starting to crochet. I think there's a few that are like basics that you need, and then there's some that you might want to get later if you're like getting really into it. Obviously you need crochet hooks, but the type of hooks I recommend are ones like this that have a handle on them. They're called ergonomic hooks, and you see the ones that are just like this metal part, but the whole thing is a metal stick, and those just do not feel nice to hold in your hand, especially if you're working on it for a long time. It's harder to hold on to, and you're more likely to get hand cramps. So ones that have a nice handle like this are a lot better. So that's basically what I only use, ones that have handles like this. I'm pretty sure this is the Clover brand. I can't remember if it's called Clover or Tulip, one of them. I think it's Clover. And I got a whole kit of different size hooks. Now, if you're just want to try crocheting just for fun and you don't know if you're gonna be into it, just get one hook. Get the hook that's recommended on the yarn that you're buying or for the project you want to try. And then if you think that you're really liking crochet, you can buy a whole kit of hooks and have all the different sizes to choose from. I also have this little travel case. I bought it on eBay. I don't remember the brand, but it has all these sizes, and these ones aren't ergonomic. They're just bamboo sticks, but I actually kind of like them anyway. And then these ones have handles, and it goes all the way from 1 millimeter, which is like almost as small as a sewing needle, to this big guy, which is 10. And I used, for actually the sweater I'm wearing, I used this number 9 hook. And if you use a really big hook yarn that's not necessarily super chunky yarn, that's okay too, because it will just make something that has a lot of holes like this. And it also is a lot faster to use a bigger hook. What else I would recommend is, the tin is cool if you want to like bring your projects with you. I have this little tin that I put a Totoro sticker on, and yeah, I just keep my darning needles and my embroidery needles in here and a couple other things. But you need darning needles. So they're kind of like sewing needles, but they're a lot bigger. And I'm going to do this. The eye is bigger so that you can fit yarn through the hole versus it being very difficult to fit some yarns through a tiny little sewing needle hole. And I use this for sewing crochet together, like if I have two pieces that I want to sew together, I use this. And I also use darning needles to sew in the ends. I also use embroidery needles to sew in the ends just because sometimes it gets the ends in there tighter and it sticks in better, but I'm going to talk more about that in my sewing in ends video. Yeah, I used to have those blue plastic darning needles or yarn needles, but they kept breaking, so I got metal ones instead. You should get scissors if you haven't already guessed. Little ones that you can put in your sewing kit are nice. I also like to use pliers. You don't absolutely need them, but I just have these little needle nose pliers and I use them for pulling the needle through when I'm sewing ends in, because sometimes it's hard for me to grip it with my fingers, and pliers help, and I also use them for other stuff sometimes. Those are the essentials, I would say. And now, this is not something that you need to buy immediately if you just want to try out crocheting, but if you find yourself getting more into fiber arts and you are tempted by guys like this, these twisty dudes, which are called hanks of yarn, you're going to need what I'm going to tell you about. And like a lot of yarn is sold in twists like this, especially like fancier, more expensive yarn. This is Noro, which is like one of my favorite yarn brands ever. It's from Japan, and they just make like super nice wool. This is a wool and silk blend, and this is wool that I lost the label to. If you buy twists of yarn like that, let me show you. So they come undone like this. It's just a loop. And when I first started, this is actually another mistake I made, was trying to just use this loop. Sometimes I would put it around my neck and then just like take the string and crochet, but it always became a super tangled mess until I realized that these are meant to be balled or caked. They're not meant to be used like this. So then I started balling them, like I put it around my neck again or around my knees or something, and then just like slowly take it out of the loop and ball it with my hands, which is a process that would take me like 2 to 3 hours, or depending on the size of the hank, which is what this is called. And then I realized that this is a thing. So this is called a yarn swift, and it's kind of like an umbrella. I have an Instagram reel I made showing how I use this setup, and maybe I'll put it in this video so you can see. The twist or the loop of yarn goes on this so that you can pull the string off and it just spins around really fast. And then what I use with that is this, which is a yarn winder. And the yarn gets wound around this thing and I twist it. So I bought both of these for 50 bucks altogether. I think this was 20 and the other one was 30. And yeah, it's definitely a game changer. If you buy these, you need these both. Another thing, I've seen people online use only the winder by itself, either because they just don't like the skein or the ball that their yarn came in. And when you use these, it actually makes a cake, which obviously I didn't make this one on my machine, but this is a cake because it's like shaped like a cake. The nice thing about cakes is that you can pull the yarn out from the center like this, so that it doesn't like roll around when you're trying to, like a ball does when you take it from the outside. And if you have a cake too, if you wanted to, you could use the loose end from the middle and the loose end from the outside and put them together if you wanted to double the yarn, like to make it twice as thick and use two strands together, and you could just take it off of one cake. So that's neat. Another thing, the thing I was talking about with unraveling a sweater or something, or even if you want to unravel or frog, as it's called. I guess it's called frog because you rip it. But anyway, if you want to frog one of your pieces, you know, if you're unhappy with something you made and you want to reuse the yarn, or if you want to reuse the yarn from a sweater from the thrift store or something, using this is also very helpful because you don't have to ball it by hand as you rip the yarn out. You can let this do the work for you. So crochet is very popular on the internet right now, and a lot of pictures just get put up all over Pinterest or whatever social media, and people don't give credit to the artist. And I've seen people make like, oh, I made this Pinterest crochet top or whatever, and it's kind of like not really giving credit to the person who designed it, which is not that cool. It's not like you're a bad person for doing that. It's just cool to know that people work really hard on their designs. Most people who design crochet make patterns, and a lot of the patterns are free, or they charge maybe between $5 and $10 for a pattern. So you can get the pattern, and some people do a pattern and a video tutorial so that you can really understand how to do it. But it's kind of a good idea to follow a pattern anyway if you want to like try to recreate something that someone else made, because not only does it give them you know, some kind of credit and like reward for their hard work of making it by you buying their pattern, but it also is probably a lot more helpful to you to learn different techniques and learn how they did it, because most patterns will have different sizes and tell you exactly how to make whatever size you want to make, which is really helpful. And it will help you learn like different crochet techniques or knitting. I think that's good for now. Yeah, so if any of this was helpful, you should subscribe because hopefully I will make more videos. You can also follow my Instagram to see more of my crochet. Yeah, I hope this was helpful, and I'm going to talk about more crochet stuff. Okay, bye.